This is the Fan Electric Ghost. We're live on the air with Juan Punchy Gonzalez, musician, producer, and video maker, tour manager, audio engineer, multiple hats. Welcome to the Fan Electric Ghost podcast. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me. How are you?
Well, it's always great. I'm doing fine. Kind of multitasking because I run the show, but I also do music and production myself. I'm in my bedroom studio. Um, I'm a synthesist. I got Moogs and modulars and kind of like a forgotten art with all these MPCs and things around today's DAWs. But
you're an old hardware guy.
Yeah, I like to take my Moogs and direct record them to multi-tracks, which is like in the world of DAWs, people don't like to do that. But I started on a Tascam and a Fostex. I'm a child of the 70s. And I still like to do it that way. I just found that for me, it works. Other people are like, oh, that's too hard.
I hear you.
But you're a veteran live sound engineer, touring producer, production manager, video maker, music producer, overall, sex symbol, as you note.
That's right. Well, someone has to bear the cross. You know what I mean? Someone has to carry the burden of sex symbol. And I figured, why not me?
If you worked on 5 or 7 continents, so you've been pretty successful with being able to do what you want. So have you always been able to work in music? Was that your original plan, and you were able to do that consistently?
Yeah, well, I started off. I started up in live theater. My family, my dad and my mom, they ran a live theatrical company here in the city of Tampa. My entire life, I grew up and I was born into it. My dad ran it for 50 years before he finally retired. So I grew up as a child actor. And then from that, I started tech managing his shows. And then at age 17 or 16, the only way you can rebel against a theatrical family is to play guitar and do rock and roll. Right. So I had my first job. I was bagging groceries, and I saved up enough money to buy my first guitar, my first little amplifier. And I decided I wanted to learn how to play guitar and be that annoying child. And and then, you get in bands and you pay a bunch of money. For studio time and stuff. And then I also bought a 4-track. I had a Tascam 4-track that I bought from a local music store here back in the late 80s. And I used to love synth. I had an old sequential circuits synth back in the day. It was monophonic.
You only have like a Prophet. Did you have a Prophet or one of the
like an old, like a small one? It was like a mini Prophet.
Oh yeah,
a little mini one.
They had a mono,
it was like a mini
Moog. Yeah, it was like a mini Moog. It was like their version of a mini Moog,
and a really terrible sequencer that like it was just awful. And then down the road, a good friend of mine turned me on to the Atari computer, the Atari 1040 STF computer, and I had that. Well, it was the first computer with built-in MIDI ports.
Oh, it had like a music production system in it. It had like an early DAW. Did it have something like that?
Well, okay. So let's get uber nerdy now. It was an 8 megahertz 68,000 processor by Motorola. The computer itself was a 16-bit computer, which in its day was actually really rare. And it came with built-in MIDI ports because the guy that designed the computer realized that with MIDI, you could network an entire office of computers with 16 individual channels with values of 0 to 127 over a course of values of 0 to 127. So they were actually able to do file sharing on these Atari computers at 19,000 baud, which was 4 times as fast as the average modem back in the day.
Yeah, that's way fast.
Right. Well, MIDI is a very fast implementation. It actually runs at, I think, 29,000 baud is the actual speed of MIDI, which is very fast, especially for 1980s technology. So this computer had the built-in MIDI ports, which is really super cool, and I ran like a really early version of Cubase on it. And I had a drum machine, a little SR16 Elisa's drum machine,
Oh, I know those.
and
Yeah,
yeah, you remember that guy?
yeah,
And I had like this Lowry synth keyboard thing that you could record the MIDI into the Atari, and then the Atari would play the MIDI back into it, and you could trigger these sounds and then run those into the 4-track, and you could do all this kind of like MIDI bouncing and all this stuff. So at the
yeah.
height of and I started working in studios, and I learned how to cut tape, and I did like one record on a reel to reel where you actually had to cut tape and do editing and stuff
Try
like
to cut
that.
it that way. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and
that's awesome.
then I
I think
never
there's
did it
something
again.
about
And
that.
then I never did it again. Once the late '90s showed up and
Oh yeah.
computers were the norm, like there
Hmm.
was no need to ever do any of that nonsense again. So I've never touched a reel of tape since the late '90s.
That's
So.
interesting. Cause I had a chord sequencer, kind of like a SQ1 or something, and it
Mhm.
had these little mini discs, and it was MIDI, and then I had it hooked up to a D50, and
Okay.
then I had a Tascam 4-tracker, so I would create all these like and it was multi tremble, so the D50 could do multiple lines, right? And so if you
Okay.
ran it into the chord sequencer with the disc, you could run like 16 tracks just on the SQ1, and then you could dump those to like one track on a 4-track, and I could create these really deep
Sure.
multi-track things.
Sure. And then bounce like tracks one, 2, and
Yeah,
3 to
just bounce
4.
them.
And now you
Yeah,
got 3 more tracks. And you're like, yeah, you
so I
know.
was using like part way digital with the chord sequencer, and then part way, analog tape running into the Tascams, and I kept that kind of sequence for a while, and then now I just use like multi tracks, like big Tascam 24s and things like that.
Really, do
And
you have a 24-track reel machine?
I don't have any reels anymore. I kind of went to multi tracks that have SD cards and stuff like that.
Oh,
But
sure. Sure, sure, sure.
but deal with wave files. But I found like going right into a multi-track without going to the DAW, like going to a Tascam 24 and actually using like the 24 tracks on that and having my Moog grandmother, all my Moogs going into it along with my D50 and my other stuff. I still like to record that way, but it's just a choice,
You know
that
what?
I made.
Whatever it takes. That's what I always say. And look, I'm one of those people that's not a fan of Pro Tools, right? I owned a Pro Tools HD6 system when it was all the rage to own one of those because
Yeah,
I had clients and the clients are like, I want to record on Pro Tools. Okay, so what do? You do not have business and because you're
yeah,
so hard
gotta
headed
do it.
about it, or do you want to make money in the business? It's called the music business, right? So it's
Yeah,
not the
yeah.
music friendship or the music cool guy. It's the music business. So if you want to make money in it, you have to own the tools that people want to play with. But that was at a time when I was touring a lot, and then I would book the studio for the time that I wasn't touring, and most of the time I was recording a lot of like local acts and stuff like that, and then I had like my record projects that would come in, and usually there were bands that I worked for, and they were just like, well, we'll just record with you, and then we'll get so and so to mix it. You know what I mean? Because they trust me to put, they trust me to do. They already know
Engineering.
me. They can hang
Yeah,
out with me, that kind of thing, and then they would go hire some boutique guy to go mix it, which is fine. You know what I mean? I don't care because again, it's a music business. If
yeah.
there's anybody that's gonna be making any money, I want to make it. It is what it is. You can throw integrity out the window. Integrity and $5 will buy you a Happy Meal. That's about it. You know
But
what I mean?
in that role, you were the recording engineer, right? That's what you were doing?
Right. Or and co-producer. So you sit there and you tell
Co-producer.
the guy, yeah, you tell the guy like, I think you could play that better. What do you think about a bend
Oh,
here?
yeah.
Maybe a different note you're singing here, that kind of thing. Let's change this line. You're kind of jumbling it. You get into that end of it. You try not to step too much on the creative process of some of your clients, but and sometimes they just don't realize that they're either better than they actually are or they're worse than they actually are talent wise, and it's just up to you to just kind of get the most you can out of the studio experience for them, so you do what you can.
So how much are you into actually like morphing the sound by applying, like all the different after effects that you can run, things like Neve effect boards and then
Oh, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, how much
Uh,
of that are you doing, or is that more for the producers to figure out what they want to do?
well, I mean, a mixing engineer is going to do whatever he wants to do anyway.
So
However,
he's gonna do that,
uh,
yeah.
yeah. However, like on my own end, like if I'm doing it from stem to stern, if I'm doing a whole project all the way to mix, all the way to master, my latest thing is all the SSL stuff that's come out.
Oh,
Solid
SSL,
state,
you like
yeah,
that?
solid state logic has really come out with, and they're hitting it out of the park. They teamed up with Slate and they teamed up with Harrison, and they're putting out probably hands down the best sounding plugins out there that are good old hardware emulations that are really well done, and then they have hardware uh, interfaces that look like a channel strip, feel like a
Oh yeah,
channel strip. So you're not. It's not all mouse and keyboard. You can actually
yeah. So it
grab like a
feels like, yeah, that's part
yeah
of the whole like benefit of those things was the fact that they were tactile. Kind of like
yeah.
why when you play a Moog like Mini Moog,
Mm-hmm.
like the reason why you like to play it is because you can actually play the controls, right?
That's part of it.
That's part of the whole experience compared to like if you're on a DX7, you can't play any controls on that thing at all. It's like where the controls, it's like gotta dive through the LED.
That
That's why
thing that
like Roland has brought
that
back all
sound.
their surface. Yeah, they brought back all their surface controls on a lot of their synths now, where they look like old Junos.
Sure.
They look like they actually look like the old structures because that's the benefit of that kind of analog design was on the Prophets and the Moogs and all the old synths that I'm kind of a big fan of is like like I'm going to play the filter. I'm going to play the cutoff. I'm going to play
Sure.
with yeah, push the sync octave sync and turn it on and off and force it like to have variability during my performance. And so it
I,
becomes
I,
like
I will
uh,
hand it to like M Audio and companies like that and Native Instruments. They put out these nice hardware controllers that kind of simulate that whole concept for you, so they can you can mouse over a controller over on your virtual synth, and you're grabbing a real knob.
mhm.
And that came out way wrong, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I get what
You're
yeah,
grabbing a real
yeah,
knob,
yeah.
but
Well, it's like my cutoff knob on my Minimo. Yeah, it's like my Minimo. Yeah, it's like I gotta touch all those knobs.
yeah,
But that's yeah, it's just it's interesting because we're kind of in the age of a lot of advanced digital synthesis, but there's a lot of people who are still holding on to like the Moogs and the Prophets and the
sure.
Oberheims. Um,
Uh,
you
I'm a
know,
big fan of the Arturia stuff. Like
yeah,
Arturia's got this whole vintage keys collection thing, which is relatively inexpensive to get into. And then once you're part of the club, then they do the upgrades on the cheap and whatever. But
mhm.
but man, I always as a kid always wanted to own a Fairlight, and I always wanted to own a
TMI,
Synclavier, right?
yeah, it's
And the
fearless. And,
idea to be able to grab this like fake light pen and draw in a waveform like you could on the Fairlight, that
mhm.
unless you were like mega rich dude or Peter Gabriel or something like that, you didn't own those kind of pieces of hardware. I mean,
You
Frank
couldn't get one
Zappa
of
owned a
those.
Synclavier. You know what I mean? Frank Zappa, gosh, of course, Emerson. I'm trying to think of Rick
Like Emerson, Lincoln
Wakeman,
Power,
all
Rick Wakeman, they probably
yeah,
had all those.
all these guys had all the cool toys back in the day. Stevie
Or they
Wonder,
had
he
the
was a big
when they had the Dream Machine. Like I'm a big purveyor of like the Yamaha GX1, you
yeah,
know, because that thing is like a monster. You
sure.
know? But just because I understand like the digital era and all the cool stuff you can do with the wavetable sense and the different things you can do with sampling and granular synthesis.
Sure.
But there's something about I don't know. I'm kind of stuck on the Moog oscillators. I kind of like that. I like that that Parliament Funkadelic use or the Sun Ra use of those
Sure.
or the Moogs. But that's just my taste.
No, those are some great tones. That was a great era of music, and there's a couple of dudes out there that are actually they're doing it for real. Like that whole Silk Sonic thing
Mhm.
with Bruno Mars is
Yeah,
just
yeah,
awesome.
that's cool the way
It's
they're doing that. Yeah.
It's such awesome production, and it's really they're managing to do something which is actually kind of unique, and that is to take this kind of like retro sound, right, and still pull off a modern production. Because you know as well as I do that like modern day drum tones don't sound anything like that you would hear back in an old 1970s rock, like an older rock and roll record or an older R&B record, like a Marvin
Yeah,
Gaye
like
or something like that.
Motown, like only the Motown drummers or the Funk Brothers or
Yeah,
Percy
those drummers are
Shuffle.
awesome, but
Those
those
drummers
drum
are so
tones,
good.
yeah,
They're
but the
so
drum tones themselves are like not modern,
not
you know,
modern.
you
They
know,
don't have that, like, they're not 927, 908s, I mean, 727, 908, 808s. They're not even Lynn LM1s or
not
anything
even
like
that
that.
close. So this is actual old, you know,
It's cool. But
coated
there's something
heads,
about
you
but
know,
the patterns, I mean, those drummers were so good at keeping
they laid
time
it
and making
down.
things, in the pocket. Like, they're so it's a lot to learn because, like, you can get on your MPC and you can try to get to that. You can try to think you're getting in that zone, but, like, go and listen to the actual stacks and the Motown and the Philly stuff, and you're like, you're not anywhere near that.
No, no, and no, those guys are just a different caliber of muso for sure. Did you happen to see that documentary on the Wrecking Crew?
Oh, the Wrecking Crew. I think I saw a clip. I haven't seen the whole thing. I've seen pieces of it.
Yeah,
I
so
never
like
watched the whole
Carol
thing.
Kay, the bass player, and all that stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, these people they played on everybody's record. Well, anything out of LA anyway. Okay, they were
yeah,
out of
yeah.
anything that was made in LA. They were on all those records, and of course they were never credited. Of course, I mean now they're credited. I mean they
They're
got
pretty
paid.
good.
They
Yeah,
got paid. They were paid. Musicians union rate, the union scale at the
kind of flat
time.
way, like we're kind of like the comic book industry. You had all these comic book artists that were paid the house rate, but they didn't own their stuff.
Right.
So Kirby and Ditko, they create Spider-Man and Fantastic Four. They got like page rate. They didn't get to actually
Yeah.
own it. It's
Yeah.
that kind of thing,
Pay for
which is
hire. There was a
yeah,
producer named Thomas Dowd. I don't know if you ever heard of this guy or not.
yeah,
But
no,
Tom, okay, so Thomas Dowd, he was 90% of his career was pay for hire. So like all of those Ray Charles records, Leonard Skinner,
all that
Cream,
stuff. Yeah, that letter stuff is
all
really
those
good.
things that he produced, he was the guy in the studio and he got pay for hire.
Maybe yeah,
You
they
know,
didn't get. He never got the contract to like give him any kind of royalty or percentage
well,
or anything.
down the road he wound up getting points because he was in demand.
Yeah, because everybody
And
knew that he had done all that work.
oh man, he was doing all the records out of Muscle Shoals. He was doing all the
Yeah,
records out of
that
Criterion Miami. I mean, it was insane, you know.
yeah, I saw the drive-by truckers that were talking about Muscle Shoals all the time. They're always talking about the old days because they were kind of like keyed into it. Some of the guys in the band were keyed into like that scene,
Yeah,
and we actually as kids they saw things going on in that scene. But it's
I bet.
interesting. Yeah, it's just kind of I'm kind of a child of the '70s, like I said, but I love like everything. I like from fusion jazz to like psychedelic rock and like punk rock, punk aesthetic. You see the kind of move from like the bands like Yes and Genesis to like the Clash and the Ramones. The kind of
Sure,
that kind of the new wave, and new wave really influenced me as a teenager.
sure. The
Why I got
early
in this, why I
'80s.
got in the sense. I got in the sense because Joy Division.
Okay,
They're not
yeah,
the heaviest synth band ever, but like the kind of introduction to the way they used the synth before they became New Order. And I liked the their approach. I was like, wow, that's cool. Because I mean, I've been listening to Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and I've been listening to Stevie Wonder on his Dream Machine on GX1 and all that. But I kind of like this. Oh, well, you can kind of come at it from a different way. This kind of dark, you kind of sparse
sure.
production. I was like, wow, it's interesting.
Yeah, the early '80s really gave us. Well, all the '80s in general. I think and I'm going to say this, and people are going to get mad or whatever, and they can get mad all they want. I don't care. I think that the '80s, honestly, was the last like real group or real run of real musician types in the in the world. Period. Like no matter what genre it was, for some reason in the 80s there was a certain caliber. It was the end of the really great music industry. And it was like that culmination where technology and talent just actually showed up together at the same time. And then in the 90s, we have what I refer to as the planet of the apes of rock and roll. And it was an era where drummers and bass players got smart, but singers and guitar players got dumb. Right? Like in the right.
Yeah,
So like some of the worst singing, some of the worst guitar playing ever in the 90s, and some of the best drumming and bass playing ever in the 90s. And it seemed like it was like this kind of upside down, if you
upside
will.
down world.
And
yeah, I mean, one of my favorite bands is The Who, of all time.
right.
Because I love Entwistle's bass playing, which is phenomenal. He's like a lead bass, right? And then Moon was like out of this world because he was kind of going dun 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 all the time in different variations. But that's like that's kind of what he was doing. But he's like he would play lead drum. He was like a lead drummer.
Sure.
With a lead bass player, and then Townsend's actually keeping the rhythm with his power chords.
Yeah.
So it's like a band trying to fall apart, but they stay together. So they have this punk aesthetic, and then they have a progressive rock aesthetic. So they go out there and do like Bob O'Reilly, and then they have these big rock operas like Tommy and Quadrophenia.
Sure.
It's like sort of kind of punk and like Yes, but not exactly Yes, because like you go see them, it's like, well, that's not Yes. That's something else. That's The Who.
Sure. Like from that era, I'm a huge Queen nut. Matter of fact, where is it? Oh, it's in the bag back there.
Well, Freddie's
I have my Brian.
Well, the whole band's amazing, but I mean, Freddie's just an amazing showman.
Yeah, I have my Brian May guitar. I'm on the new record, the new Cosmic Punch record. I played it exclusively. So like, the idea was that I wanted to create a fake super group that had like Brian May playing guitar and these different players playing bass and different. So I would try to emulate the way that they played their instrument. I tried
amazing. He's a really. I like the musicality of his solos. Like you got people who are like speed demons.
Yeah,
and then you have guys who actually they have like style. Like style, and you're actually saying something with the solo, and it's not like you're not trying to just blow everybody with your speed and technique. You're actually expressing something,
Well, he's composing solos, right? It's a difference between a guy that like does an improvisational solo, and there's people that are fantastic at that, and then there are people that compose solos. Elliot Eastman of the Cars was another one that would compose solos.
Very good. Yeah, very good.
Like his solos are a work of art in and of themselves. And then then you had guys like Eddie Van Halen that they would just burn, and they would burn so well that it just sounded like he wrote it. But I mean, he just kind of
Eddie was in a class where he could do that, and I think everybody was trying to be him, but they weren't him.
No way.
They like you get the guy who's like that's the guy like the Hendrix, and then like the Coltrane, like Davis. You get the guys who can really do it, and then you get people like, well, I'm trying to get there, but I can't really.
And arguably, like Hendrix wasn't like a great guitar player. Arguably, you know what I mean? Like there were definitely guys out there who probably technique-wise smoked him.
Technically smoked him, but I think it's the whole picture as a songwriter.
That's right. It's his
in terms of his chord arrangements, his lyrics, his vocal. It's like the whole package. Like Dylan's not the best at anything.
Whoever told that guy he could sing. You know what I mean?
Like it's like how he can, if you think about it, if you don't like his voice, but if you think about songs like Idiot Wind, or if you think about his classic songs, right? The composition of him and the structure is like, wow. It's just the way his delivery as a songwriter. I mean, he won a Pulitzer Prize. I mean, he just is in a different zone. I mean, Hendrix appreciated that and was really drawn to Dylan's songwriting and tried to incorporate it in his style,
Yeah, I think that, there was a point in time, I think, where everybody was just, a lot of the folkies were heavily influencing the heavier end of rock and roll, because I think I think a lot of the heavier guys realized that if they wanted to go home with a girl and not just talk to dudes all night, then I guess they had to slow it down and sing a love song or two.
They had to be deeper. They had to be a little deeper and kind of come up with something a little more magical.
A little something. You know what I mean? Like and I'll tell you, because some of those folk musicians are, visually not very stunning at all. You know what I mean?
Well, they had to figure out like different techniques. Dylan would come out with these different like versions of himself.
Sure.
Depending on it, like it's Americana version, it's kind of painted, during the Rolling Thunder days. With
he reinvented.
Reinvent himself, create characters like both. And people don't really consider he was doing that, but when you look at it, he actually was doing
that. You're saying that Dylan was the Madonna of the '60s, that he kept reinventing himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's coming out there like Arlo Guthrie, Woody Guthrie at first.
Sure.
And then he comes with the nasal character, and nobody ever heard that before. Like, what the heck is that? And then he went and does that thing with Johnny Cash. And he actually settled his voice, and it's like, that's nothing like the nasal voice, right? And he would change into these different, even to this day, he does like these different things that you wouldn't expect. Given the range, he has a certain range, but he still pushes within his range. He pushes it pretty far.
You know what I heard recently? I hadn't listened to this record in like 20 years or something like that. The first Traveling Wilburys record.
Oh, that's a good record, yeah.
I mean, what? Like, it's literally like it's the Mount Rushmore of rock and roll of the 70s is like on
Petty
display.
Awesome. Yeah, having Petty in there and Harrison, it was like, wow. And
George Harrison, Petty, Roy Orbison, Jeff Lynne, and Bob Dylan. Yeah. What could Roy possibly Orbison, go wrong?
It's like a dream. Jeff Lynne. I mean, Jeff Lynne's like the Beatle fanatic. He's a total Beatle fanatic, and then he kind of creating this kind of like a weird, like hyper version of the band, but it's kind of Beatle influenced and ELO.
It was great. It's a great record.
Cool. Yeah,
it's short.
So cool.
It's like 30 minutes long. It's a tiny little record, and it's just it seems like it was like, and I don't know much of the history. I guess I should research it, but it seems like it's just a bunch of dudes that got together one weekend and said, "Hey, dude, let's write some records."
I think they all appreciated each other. I think they all they understood. It's like they all got together and said, hey, this works. This is the kind of, you get the band together. It's like this we vibe together. This is actually going to work. Sure. Because like they had the same mission. I think they understood where they wanted to go. But sometimes that's not exactly what happens in band. Sometimes the band's like is blowing apart the whole time until they totally explode. But
yeah. Yeah, no, I tell you, I have two young boys, right? I'm one of those guys that became a dad like old, like I had my first one at 44, right? So he's 8 now, puts me at 52. Oh, wow. But my 8-year-old kid loves Kiss, and it's awesome. He loves Kiss. Like I did when I was that age. When I was that age in
the 70s, like
I remember staring at the vinyl with Kiss Alive 2, Gene Simmons with the Blood, and all this stuff.
The comic book. I had the Marvel comic book.
Yes.
Like they had a Kiss comic book special, and I was like running around trying to get it. And
they had the Kiss Barbie dolls.
I had all the stuff. I had every toy, every comic, everything you could get. The fake blood stuff, like the boots, all. Every kid, we're young black kids, right? But we lived in the suburbs, so we like it. Like I said, I like punk rock. I was listening to the Clash, and I was listening to the Sex Pistols and the Ramones, and anything coming out of CBGBs. So I'd make like, oh, Kiss, that's cool. Me and my cousins were like, everybody was looking at us, and we're like, how come you like that stuff? It's like, why don't you? What about the soul music? Well, I kind of like that. I like James Brown. Yeah, I like Funkadelic. Sure. But my taste was like, I'm going to listen to Funkadelic. I'm not going to really listen to everything that's on the soul radio. I'm kind of going into the underground soul.
I hear you. Did you ever go to CB's before it closed? CBGB's?
No, I never got to go to it. But I was into the scene. I was a kid that was like really reading about the scene in the magazines.
Gotcha.
And I got to all the bands, like Television, all the bands coming out of there. I was just like, yeah, that's what I like. I like that. I like the diversity of that scene.
Well, I got to mix one show there. for a band called Diabolic, which is like death metal music
Oh,
from
like a death
Florida,
metal.
right?
Yeah,
Death metal, right? Straight up, right? And I just produced a record for them, and they were like, "Hey, we're gonna play this show in CBGB's. We'll fly you up and you mix us." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, sure.
that's
Why
cool.
not, right?" So and they only played like I think like an hour that night or something like that. They were part of it was like a several
Collective,
band kind
a
of little mini
collective,
festival.
like a
No, it was
collective.
like a little mini festival,
Oh, festival.
Um,
Okay.
it was like 5 different bands from around the area, and then them. I don't know how they got on it,
Hmm.
but they did. And yeah, the bathroom was just as gross as everybody says it was.
Well, you
Um,
expect that.
the PA sounded okay. Like I was expecting it to be like kind of beat up. No, the PA sounded all right. And for its size, it was I think it's like 300 capacity or something like that. It's a little
Yeah, it's
room.
just, that's the kind of the intimate kind of shows there. 'Cause I mean, I was a kid, I was following bands out of like CBGBs, and then bands like Who's to Do and the Replacements and
Sure.
the Meat Puppets. And I was like into that kind of alternative kind of scene. And I really, I was really into Who's to Do. I thought Who's to Do was like the bomb to me. I like their punk aesthetic coming out of Minneapolis. Is like there was something different to me. I like the way they approached it. Like Zen Arcade, record the album in like 2 days in a warehouse. That's it. First take, second take. That's it. I kind of like the idea that they just did it. You know, and
Yeah,
the critics at the time.
Husker Du is one of those awesome. Again, it was representative of this era where you had these professionals that were in studios that were able to record just about anything that came through there. Because a band like Husker Du isn't going to go and hire a dedicated producer to work for them. You know what I mean? They're going to whoever the engineer
Hey,
is
that's
that day
smart.
in the
That's smart.
studio. You know, he's the guy. And then they have to they had probably small budgets even for then. Because keep in mind, I mean, records were very expensive to make in the 70s and 80s. The price of records to make records has gone down quite a bit.
Exponentially, probably, yeah. You
Yeah, with
don't
the
have to
advent,
spend like 6 months and 500,000 to $1 million budgets. That's not really
it's not
happening, right?
real. That happens with a couple of people. I
With the
mean,
big with the big people, probably. Yeah,
yeah, Taylor Swift, I'm sure spends a gaggle of money on
she's spending
records,
that kind
and
of money.
I mean, like, people like that, they do. I mean, um, a lot of these people just wind up buying all the gear they need on their own and just kind of do their own thing, and they'll hire a dude to come in, like for example, like the Foo Fighters guys.
Oh
They
yeah,
basically gutted Sound
yeah,
City.
they took that board, they took that Neve board out of there.
The board, the tape machine. I mean, they gutted the place and moved it to his personal facility. And he hires Butch Vig, the guy that produced the first Nirvana record, to be his in-house engineer.
Yeah,
Okay.
so he's got it all the time.
So
He's
he
got what he
wakes up.
wants.
Yeah, he's got a band on demand. He calls them up and says, "Hey guys, we're gonna track. Drop what
Yeah,
you're doing." Because you guys are all on retainer, so drop what you're doing and I'll see you here in the studio in about 8 hours. And then they go, all right, well, what else are they going to do? This is what they do for a living.
yeah. It was kind of like Prince. I mean, he built Paisley Park because like he
Yeah,
wanted to just own it. Like he was recording like every day. He was freaking
yeah.
crazy. And if
And,
you that type of person, like building the studio in your house, why not? Because then I don't have to go down the Sunset. I don't have to go to any of these big
yeah.
studios. I just do it whenever I want.
That's what I did in my last facility. My last facility was I converted a 2-car garage into a giant control room. And then I had 2 bedrooms on the other side of the house that were performance rooms. And I ran all the cabling through the attic, and I had closed circuit TV
Oh
as
wow.
opposed to having
Cool.
the glass. You know how you have the
Oh, you did it
glass.
like that? Oh, you did it like that.
I
Oh,
did it
that's
like
cool.
that. I just had a totally different room, and then I had a screen in front of me that acted like the glass.
Oh, so
And
you use like a big LED or a big LLC with some kind of screen to do it.
at first, it was just a 32-inch
Great.
CRT, like an old
CRT.
school TV. I mean, I was doing this. It was 2000. There was no flat screens, and then they would have a TV in their room, and they'd have a camera pointed at me, and they could look at me, and I could look at them,
Oh wow.
and it was like that. And I actually got the idea to do that by watching the making of Attack of the Clones.
Attack of
You
the
know the
Clones.
movie Attack of the
Yeah,
Clones.
yeah, I know that movie. Yeah,
So they got Frank Oz doing the voice of Yoda in a completely different room in Skywalker Sound, and they're sitting at the big Neve console and all that, and he's on a television somewhere in the facility, and he's recording
just
all the
doing it.
Yoda lines.
Wow.
So I said to myself, like, well, why do
If
you need
actors
the
can do it,
glass?
yeah. If actors can do it, then you could do it. Because
Why do you need the glass? You know what I mean? What's that all about? It's
well, it
this
could be a
extra.
distraction too. I mean, they really need it
Yeah.
to see. Are you being so visual? Or are you going to actually get into it? You know,
All right. So,
because
well, it works out in many ways, because like when I would actually have like singers and stuff tracking with me, I would cut off the camera to the control room so they couldn't see what was happening in the control room, and they were more free to
focus
kind of
on
be
their part.
themselves and work
Yeah,
on because if they have to make that stupid face to hit that note and all that, and then they look up and they see
you
people
know,
in
they
the
may
control room
subconscious.
laughing. You
Yeah,
see the guys in the control like, ah,
you know that famous guys like Hendrix. They used to put like blankets or sheets up so people
sure,
couldn't see them. You know, because they were
yeah.
so like shy in a way that they would do that. I mean, Prince was known for doing that too. Like in certain situations, he would close it off, put like sheets in front of the class, and like you don't know what the heck he's doing. You
No,
know, but
imagine being that guy. You're at the mic and you're like just singing your heart out, and you hit the high note, and then you look into the control room for like some sort of
people are
affirmation,
laughing.
and no, everybody's just like,
What? What's that?
you know, dude,
Dude, you're
budget,
over the
you
budget.
know,
Run out of tape.
trying to kills your vibe, like instantly. So the enclosed room, and thank the maker for pitch correction. In all fairness, like
Mhm.
I found recording other people as well as recording myself that the chance to make art is no longer subjugated by whether or not you hit the note dead
Yeah,
on.
yeah. Well,
You
sometimes
can
get a guy like Neil Young. He kind of purposely doesn't
oof,
hit the pitch because it's kind of like is endearing that he can be
I'm
have a shaky. They can be shaky on purpose. You know, in some cases, but
look, I'm sorry, but I'm one of those people that just doesn't get it.
you don't get that.
I don't get it. To me, he's like the zucchini of rock and roll. I don't get it.
I kind of dig it, but I mean, I'm coming from a different place in terms of I dig Lou Reed and it's kind of monotone.
I like Lou Reed. I like Lou Reed.
Yeah.
You know,
They didn't care about pitch at all. It was they keep it in the mono.
I saw Lou Reed in concert at this it was like a small theater here in Tampa. I want to say like 91, 92, something like around that era,
What
right?
you're doing like New York, like he had just put New York out or something.
I don't remember.
I think like
I
New
was
York
like
was like a
19.
big comeback for him. Be
I
like
was
that album did really well.
I was like 19 years old, and I remember Lou Reed being the voice of Mock from the movie Rock and Rule, which was an animated movie that I really liked when I was a kid. And someone gave me the tickets to go see it. I'm like, sure, I'll go see it, And I really gained a lot of respect for that man. And I mean, I should anyway because of what he accomplished and all that stuff in music. But I mean, I didn't know anything about it. I was a 19-year-old kid. I was into Yngwie Malmsteen and Paul
Oh, you didn't know
Gilbert.
about the Velvets and all that. See,
I was a Ripper fan.
yeah, you didn't know about.
I was into that. You know what I mean at the time, and I just got these tickets and I got to see it, and I really learned a lot that day, and it gave me a new perspective on a different type of guitar playing, and he really was quite good as a
Yeah,
guitar player, and
yeah,
his guitar tech was really neat. His guitar tech didn't seem to use because of course I'm paying attention to everything that's going on the stage. And his guitar tech didn't seem to use a guitar tuner.
yeah.
So what he did was he put the guitar on his neck backwards, right? And he was tuning the strings, feeling the vibration on the back of his head,
Oh wow,
tuning the strings to the song that was being played on the stage.
wow.
So I don't know if that was a good or a bad thing because maybe progressively as the night went on, the guitars just slowly went out of tune, uniformly out of tune together. You know what I mean? Like as a night either went sharp or flat. depending on what was being played on stage, and there was no actual mechanical tuner. But I found that to be really interesting too. There's like even the guitar tech is like this kind of analog kid. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I don't need
Wasn't
no
doing it.
tuner.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Lou is kind of famous for people interviewing him. There was a documentary. He was talking about like Transformer. And there were a lot of guys, like some of his producers and engineers, were saying, well, he didn't really care about the guitars being tuned. He would just pick up as something's out of tune. He said, well, hey, Lou, that's out of tune. He said, well, I don't care. I'm going to use it because I'm going to use it this way. Is the way I choose to do it this way. And he just really came at it from that kind of really like, I'm just going to come at it like, like if you go back to the Velvets and he was hanging out with Andy Warhol, it was like total art. We're just going to
a lot of drugs. A lot of drugs.
But it's just kind of perspective. Like we're just going to do the art for art's sake. Whether it's perfect or imperfect, it didn't really matter. It was just like, that's what it's point in time, what we're going to do. It's how I feel right now.
Sure.
And it doesn't have to be technically perfect at all. It has to be what I feel that it needs at the moment, which is sometimes it's kind of hard in this kind of digital world. People are like, oh, I got to be perfectly aligned. I got to be on the beat. I got to be, and that kind of mindset, you don't get an album like White Light, White Heat out of that.
Well, it's not the new artist per se. It's the audience.
Yeah,
I think the audience would hear something that's not quite perfect and say that's bad. And it's the argument about the mastering standards, the loudness wars. So I'm sure you've heard of this kind of concept.
I heard about that, yeah.
So like everybody's trying to get a record that's a little louder than the other guy's record, a little bit louder than the other guy's record, or at least as loud as this guy's record, whatever. And you lose a lot of the dynamics, you lose a lot of the punch, you lose a lot of the air that used to be pushed by the speakers to create this kind of thing. So if you, a really great example of that is to put in like a record that go to Spotify and then like put in a record that say Bon Jovi or some any band put out in the early part of their career, and then listen to a record that they put out recently. Yeah, and you'll notice a huge volume difference.
Yeah.
And the way it impacts you and the tones and everything is very different. And so I think that the level of perfection has gotten very sterile, right? It's sterile at this point. Like it lacks.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to have
cool guy factor.
Yeah, I mean it kind of is like, to me, is like if you get it to that point, like I'll go listen to like Quadrophenia on vinyl, and then I listen to it on Spotify, and I hear all this stuff on the vinyl that I don't hear on Spotify. There's all this stuff I'm missing, and it's like, so however they're engineering it, like I'm losing like a lot of this record, how it was actually intended to be heard, and I don't know if the audience today knows the difference, because I was a child in the 70s listening to vinyl. And I was listening to 8-track, and I was listening, the CDs before we got to the MP3s and the compression. And I was like, I don't know if people know the difference because maybe they never heard it.
Well, I remember the anger that everybody had when CDs came out. They're like, that sounds stupid. It sounds plastic. It sounds terrible. And now we long for them. We're like, oh my gosh, if only we'd have this little piece of plastic that was so brittle that a little micro scratch on it would ruin it forever. You know what I mean? If only we could have that again. You can't always.
There's a lot of
grass is always greener.
Well, there's a lot. I see a lot of bands, like a lot of like small, independent emerging bands, still like doing custom batches of vinyl when they can, because I think there's a certain market for people like, I like the artwork, I like the presentation. Like it's like if you just get something off a Spotify playlist, you don't get the full picture. Like as if you actually, when I went out and got that Zen Arcade album, I got the full picture of Who's Skidoo. If I just listen to like one song of examples of that type of music on a Spotify playlist, I don't get the picture of what Zen Arcade was.
No,
nor will you hold this. Today don't lose
this thing that sometimes it had the double fold. Like Kiss Alive 2 had the big fold out, and then like you saw the whole band like live on stage in the smoke, and you're just like, man, that looks cool. That's awesome.
The whole experience, like even listening to Pink Floyd. Like you go in the
Sure.
basement with your friends and you're listening to Pink Floyd, and it's not one song; it's like the whole freaking album. Like
Yeah.
you sit there, you listen to the whole thing, like Dark Side of the Moon. You just listen to, and I don't know if kids do that with the artists today. Do they have pieces of work that would make you sit there and listen to Sergeant Pepper's all the way through, or Close to Edge all the way through? Are kids even into that? Do they even see music in that way?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that the trade-off for most people, not just kids, is that in your telephone, hooked up to your car through Bluetooth, you literally have the entire Tower record store
Yeah,
at the
but
drop of a hat.
I think they lose the experience of, to me, like listening to an album is like reading a great book.
Mm.
And if you just treat it as like background music, or you can just carry it around with you, you lose the, actually, like you're taking cliff notes for an artist, right? You're getting like, maybe to me, the single doesn't represent the core of any artist. It's the deeper tracks on their record that represent who they are. And if you
Tell
never
that
hear
to
that,
tell
then you
that to
don't.
Tony Basil, man. You know who that is?
Yeah, I
Tony,
know.
yeah,
Yeah, I know.
one song. That's
Mickey.
it. That's
Yeah, I know
yeah,
Mickey. Yeah,
one
but
song.
one hit wonders.
I mean, but not even a record for it. Just one song.
That's
Not
it.
even a record. You know what I mean? Like,
Wasn't she like a video, like director? She was like a dancer trainer. And
choreographer.
happened to,
She was the
yeah,
Paula Abdul of the early 80s.
yeah, and then she happened to find that one song. And I guess
One song.
she couldn't
And
replicate it.
well, I mean, nobody. She never. I don't think nobody ever asked her to make a record, nor she had expressed any interest in making an actual record. So
Yeah, one off.
one song, baby. That's it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of one hit wonders that actually have more songs. They just never got them through.
Yeah, like Flock of Seagulls. You know,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
Kajagoogoo.
Kajagoogoo, yeah. You can name them off. Like Echo, well, Echo and the Bunnymen people. There was a couple of songs that broke through a little bit. Man, I had all their records, but like nobody probably knows who they are unless you're really into it. But Big Country, like how many
Big
people remember
Country.
Big Country?
Yeah, Big Country with their hit "Big Country."
Yeah,
From the record "Big Country."
Yeah.
Like
They had
Talk
like 5 albums, but they had one hit.
Yeah, Talk
Yeah.
with their song Talk from the record Talk.
Yeah. Yeah, you got more work than that, but you never see it. But that's just like the history of music, is like if you actually can get that second hit or third or fourth or fifth, then you can be more sustainable.
I mean,
But you got
hats off to those people that can get people to listen more than once.
yeah, that's a hard thing.
Good for them. I mean, I don't, being an independent artist myself, and I always like to say that my dozens of fans, all the flat the earth, I mean, of course, I like to add a few zeros onto my fan base like anybody else, but at this point, well, at this point, you're gonna love this. This is really amusing. I have two small children, right, and I'm a fairly older guy, so I'm hoping at some point that my children will be teen parents. And I'll have grandchildren before I die.
Oh, yeah,
before I die.
They don't want them waiting until 40.
Yeah, don't do like I did. I tortured my parents for all these years. You know what I mean? but I put out about an album a year on average, right? So about 10 songs, 11 songs a year. Original music. I record everything, all that stuff on my own. And the idea here is that by the time I die, right, I'll have literally hundreds of songs available in the ethos.
Yeah.
So that my
legacy
grandchildren and my great grandchildren or whatever will be able to listen to it and say, "Wow, that's awful." It's this really long play troll. I'm playing the long game on the trolling of my own great grandchildren.
Yeah, like, oh,
I want them to be thoroughly embarrassed by the music videos. I want them to just roll their eyes as far back into their head as possible. What
Dad,
is this
what's
garbage?
that? What are you trying to do, Dad? Come on.
Well, my two children love my music, and that is the sweetest thing when I'm in the car and they're
They
singing.
like it.
They love it.
That's cool.
And they singing the lyrics all wrong. You know what I mean? The way you're supposed to when you're a kid, you sing the lyrics all wrong.
You get the
wrong
what I mean? Idea.
Oh, it's the best.
The wrong word. Well, that's always cool. It's cool that it's cool if you get them to be into it. You know, that's always a big, like if your family like that's always like a struggle because like when you're teenage rebellion like that your basement band like your mom and everybody hate your dad's like turn that off. If I get home, you're not playing. It's like when I'm home, you're not playing.
Are you kidding? If my kids got into music, I would be like the worst. I'd be like, dude, let me jam with you. Come on. What key are you in? Let me grab a guitar. Hold on.
Jump on it.
Let me get a guitar off the wall. Hold on a second.
Well, I think it's so, being a musician to me is cathartic, man. I just do it because I love it. And, I kind of, got into the podcast because it seems to, it just brings people to my, the idea of Phantom Electric Ghost. But, I just, whether I ever get anybody listening to a Phantom Electric Ghost song isn't really like the point. Like I kind of use it to just get through a lot of ideas that are kind of percolating in my head. And I just put it out there. And it's sometimes like when you put something in the world, you never know when, you get opportunities and sometimes something comes from it. You never know. And I've had actually situations where people have like found some of my stuff and it's led to an opportunity. I'm like, wow, you just don't know. So I think it's just as an independent artist, it's just, you put it out there in the world and you don't be scared of what you put out there. You just deal with it.
Sure. 100%. I mean, and again, I'm sure like you're like me, you have a day job. You're doing something for a living that actually makes you money. I'm lucky enough that with my touring and my whole musical career, I work. My day job is I'm the audio engineer at a theater locally, right? Mm-hmm. So and I act as a liaison between, because we're a unionized room. I act as a liaison called a steward. I'm the steward with my building for between the union and the building's production management team, right? And I deal with the roadies from the tours, and we put their show in and we pull their show out, that kind of thing. And I mix about, I don't know, maybe 20% of what comes through my theater, because the rest of the time they bring their own front of house engineers.
Your own people,
right?
Yeah.
Of course. Like I used to do. I was the guy that came in and said, hey, get out of the console. I'm mixing tonight. You know what I mean? So, of course, and I get it. And it's fine with me, because during those moments where I don't have to mix is when I'm upstairs on my laptop working on my next music video.
Doing your own thing, yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I know that I know they're not going to blow up my PA. I got limiters on it. They're not going to blow it up. You know what I mean? Yeah. So if it sucks, it's their fault. I didn't do it.
They wanted to take it, so they own it.
Yeah, you want to drive the car, dude? You have at it. Enjoy it. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to wreck it.
Don't hit the ditch.
But and oddly enough, my venue that I work in is fantastic sounding room. Like there's how you go into certain live concert venues and they sound like poop, and there's just no helping it because acoustically
it's just like trash acoustics. You're like,
man,
what do here?
I got a $500,000 PA up in the air, and the room was acoustically treated 10 years ago when they did the build out. If you want reverb in this room, you have to add it. It's like mixing in a control room. It's fantastic. It's awesome. so forgiving, and the slightest little fader move is like, whoa, like you really like notice it. Unlike a lot of spongier rooms where you really got to do aggressive, it's so it's a dream to mix in, and anybody that can't mix in my room really needs to retire. Because my room it's definitely what you see is what you get. You're not fighting acoustics so much as you're having to create acoustics. It's like mixing a record.
Yeah.
So
that's cool.
And
you're able to experience that, because your daily, that work probably assist you in what you do for your own work. The fact that you have the skill set to know how things should sound and how the room
Sure.
should sound, or how that a band should sound in that room based on how they play and what they're trying to carry over. Being able to
Sure, and
make
it's
those.
also really handy, like when we're in off time and there's no show in the venue, and I can like crank up this PA system and just listen to anything I want to listen to it, like at any volume I want to listen to it at, and it's great. It's like listening to the biggest, coolest stereo you've ever heard in your life.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah, it's
mean? It
amazing.
really is. It's
Yeah,
awesome. Yeah, it is
you have
really
your hands on
extremely
something like that, then you're like, wow, you can test out like
yeah.
how your stuff is gonna sound there.
Well, not just that, but like you can remaster records that kind of suck. You're like, yeah,
Oh,
well, let me just fix these EQs a little bit, you know? Yeah.
fix it. That's
You like the
cool.
record, but you hate the production.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's probably a lot of records like that. If you go back into the past, it's like they could have done a better job on this. But it's everybody's kind of personal taste of like what you like. So
Yeah.
it's like your lens that you put on it. Depends on like where you're coming from.
Yeah, like for example, you know the album 5150 by Van Halen? You know this
Oh
record?
yeah, I
Okay.
had that record.
That's straight up like Simmons drums. Like that's straight up
Hmm.
like octagon shaped,
Yeah, electronic drums. Yeah,
Simmons
like Prince,
drums.
Prince, Prince Trevor drums. Yeah,
Well, not even the courtesy of an LM4. You know what I mean?
yeah,
This
not
is
even
straight
that.
up Simmons, like
Without an LM4.
you know what I mean? Like it's like Simmons, and there's just no way that anything like that would fly today. But man, you
Yeah.
listen to every song on that record and it's a hit. Every song is a hit. And Sammy is singing his took us off the entire time. Eddie rules. I mean, a whole record is just no wonder it was Van Halen's first #1 record.
Well, I
Million
mean,
Mo-
like Sammy is like a lot of people like they I don't know. Some people either like you know David Lee Roth
I like
or the
both.
Tone.
I like
I
both. You
have
get
I kind of like I like the way Diver Down sounds, and I like the early Van Halen, and
sure.
I dig Sammy because Sammy's got a lot of talent. Some people kind of put him down, and I think
Well,
that stuff is really good. I mean, I like
they're lame.
the band he was in before that. It was the name of the famous that band he was in.
Montrose.
Montrose. Yeah, I mean, he was cool. Maybe not
Yeah, yeah.
everybody knows that, but that stuff was cool to me.
Sure. No, I mean, look, I saw Van Halen with Roth. I saw Van Halen with Hagar. And I mean, they were just I don't know, they were just bigger with Hagar, and that's cool. You know what I mean? I mean, it was definitely like more legendary with Roth, and I got to see Roth with Steve Vai that first Eat 'Em and Smile tour. I saw
Oh
that,
yeah, that's cool.
and that was fantastic. You know what I mean? Like that was really 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 cool stuff. I there's nothing to complain about. It's okay. You can like chocolate and vanilla ice cream. You
Yeah,
don't
the
have to be
different
you don't have to
phases
be
of it.
team Bon Scott or team Brian Johnson. You
Yeah,
don't have to do
but
any of
some people
that.
are like they get like that, with bands. They like either like the Peter Gabriel Genesis or the Phil Collins Genesis. Even though Phil was there as the drummer in both, like one
Yeah,
guy's doing lead versus the other. Some progressive people were like, we like the Peter Gabriel Genesis a little bit better because it was a little more out there and
sure.
less commercial. So it was like that's kind of what we liked. But you know, Abacab's
Yeah,
cool. Yeah.
yeah. In the metal community, there's always that like one guy that goes up to the band and says, "Hey, I really like the first song of your first record, but the rest sucks. Can you sign my shirt? You know what I mean? Can you sign my shirt? You know what I mean? Like well, why are you here? If
Get
you
out
hate
of
the
here.
rest of the catalog, you're, or going up to the band guy, hey, it's been like 5 years since your last record. What's up? Like, what's up?
What's up?
What's up? I don't know. None of your business. How about that, pal? What's up? My middle finger. That's what's up, pal.
That's
You know
what's
what
up.
I mean?
Yeah, some people just want you to be like that one period that they're into,
Yeah, that's
right?
what it is.
And it's like, okay, well, you're 17, you liked, Aerosmith. yeah, that's where they were, but that's not where they are now. You
Dude,
know?
I mean, think about all the people that abandoned Metallica when they put out the Black record,
Mhm.
and they're just like, oh, they're not heavy anymore. They suck. Okay, well, that's your opinion, mate. They just
They
added
got
a
them sold
zero.
out.
They just added a zero on the amount of people that like them. So I mean, however you want to look at it, pal. It's cool that you're gone. I guess go dig on
Everybody
some
has an
Anthrax.
evolutionary moment. Like if you
Yeah,
evolve to like push to another level, and then people think you're sold out.
yeah.
Every
Well,
time.
look, one of my all-time favorite bands is Queen, right?
Oh yeah,
And
Queen's awesome.
since Freddie's death, they've put out like a couple of records. Like I think one of them is called "Made in Heaven," and I think they
Mhm.
put out another one after. It's all kind of lost archive Freddie stuff, stuff that he had recorded before he died, or
Oh,
stuff that
that kind of stuff. Yeah,
they kind of
archive stuff is cool.
scrapped. They kind of scrapped and they kind of tracked around it, kind of thing. And dude, I've never bought any of it, or nor have I listened to it. And it's not because I don't like Queen, and it's not because I don't miss Freddie singing or anything like that. It just I've never pushed play on it, and it's not. You know what? I'm going to do it now. Now that I've said it, now that I've said
Mhm.
it out loud, I'm going to push
Check it
play on
out.
it and listen to it. I'll check it out tomorrow, even though it's been out like 20 years. You know what I mean? Like when they, I think the Beatles put out some new song. I love the Beatles. They put out some new
Yeah,
song recently. They found some old tape of John singing, so we wrote a song around it.
yeah.
Okay, cool, dude. Is the
Right,
Sergeant
a lot of
Pepper's?
Beatle purists were kind of on that because like that's not a real Beatles song. That's
Yeah,
kind of like when they took some Hendrix stuff and they had people play on it.
yeah.
Like they had some people go and do overdubs. Like you can't really overdub on Hendrix, man.
All right,
Just
so I'm
leave it
sure
what it is.
you've been listening. Have you been listening to this thing about master real ownership and the copyrights losing copyrights and things like that for master reels? Have you been following any of this stuff?
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Okay, so I wish I remember the name of this gentleman. He came to my theater recently, and he's a Muscle Shoals like session guitar player. He still lives in Muscle Shoals and all that. And he's telling me that what they've been doing is they've been going in and finding all these 4-track masters that are sitting in the vaults,
Oh
right?
wow.
And they lift the vocal tracks off of them,
Oh
right?
yeah, because they can pull them out. Yeah.
Then they get a live drummer to manually make a click track
Oh, to go with it.
over it, right?
Oh wow.
And then they bring in a whole new band and track the record around the original vocal. So they
Oh
just did a
wow.
whole bunch of Aretha Franklin stuff,
Like that.
and like that. So get it,
Oh wow.
expect like new versions of old Aretha Franklin records played by a brand new band, all new recordings of the band in stereo, because a lot of that stuff is mono, in stereo with modern recording.
Hmm.
Because now they've that allows them to recopyright the master reel
Oh, so they're trying to
for another
kind of
100
like
years.
redo it. Oh, so then they'll own it. They'll get the money off of it.
That way they can obtain royalties for these songs that are getting ready to expire. Well, you heard what happened to Mickey Mouse, right? Like Mickey Mouse is 102 or 103 years old now, right? So because
Mhm.
of that, Disney no longer is public
Owns it.
domain. The
Mhm.
original Steamboat Willie, Mickey Mouse, is public domain,
Oh wow.
and
Probably
the
not happy about
second,
that.
well, there's nothing they can do about it. That's just the copyright law of the United States. It is what it is, right? So the entire musical of Showboat, the Broadway musical show that has
Yeah.
Old Man River, da
Yeah,
da da
yeah.
da da. That whole thing is public domain.
Oh yeah.
Today,
Yeah, that's the way the copyright law is. Yeah.
you could record that entire record note for note and not pay 1 cent in royalty.
Oh, that must be the new way to get some cash. It's the new way. But like I don't know. Like to me, it's like I have some love for the original recordings, and I'm not always so keen on hearing the more modern version. I guess people today because they like purity or whatever they think it is. But I mean, I go listen to 78s of James Brown and the Famous Flames, and I wouldn't really want anybody to re-record that. because that's what it is to me. It is what that 78 is. But
Sure.
I mean, that's just my opinion. But maybe some people think they want to do it better. It's like, how are you going to do that better? Probably not.
Probably not. Probably not. But I still like this idea of taking these original vocals and giving them some new love, especially for people that are already dead. If they're already dead,
Yeah, if it's stuff that wasn't, yeah, if it's stuff that nobody ever really heard and it never got really pushed out, that's kind of cool because it gives it life to something that can be appreciated. Like if it's an archive and we never really got to it, I'm really more into that than as if it's something that's really highly known. I'm not so much into that, but if it's something that was like more like unearthed and we never really heard it, that's kind of been my as a fan. That's kind of what I'm into. But
yeah, no, I hear you. But it's still better than I guess anything Diddy did.
oh yeah, well yeah, it's like just lift the Sting song and put crappy lyrics over.
And I'm one of those people, and I hate. And I'm going to say something that's. I'm not a fan of Rage Against the Machine. I don't get it. I like the Beastie Boys. It was already there. You know what I mean?
Well, they were
I
punk,
mean the
yeah.
Beastie.
Yeah, they
I'm
were
saying
punk.
the Beastie Boys kind of already did it. You know what I mean? So Rage Against the Machine was like, yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, their thing
I
was
mean,
they're trying to be like an MC5, like if you know the whole history of MC5, like they're trying to be a modern
I
version
know,
of
but there were no
MC5.
jams.
Yeah,
No
they weren't like
jams were
kick
being
out the
kicked out.
jams.
I
It's
didn't.
not like kick out the jams.
I didn't feel. I didn't
You didn't feel that
jams
MC5
being
in
kicked.
it. You didn't feel that. All right. Well, we actually hit our hour mark. We're talking so much. I really loved it, but we do tend to have to keep it within the hour.
Can I plug my
But it
record
was
really quick?
fantastic, and we do have your link there for Cosmic Punch.
All right. The new record is called For All Nerd Kind. It's all nerd music for nerds, and I only sing about nerdy stuff. And the new video is called I Love Anime. Check it out, and if you don't, then you're a jerk.
Can you get to that
Threaten
from
your
that
audience.
link? Can you get?
Yeah, if you
Can
go
you
to
get that from Cosmic?
cosmicpunch.com, absolutely.
That's awesome, and that will be fully clickable for everybody watching. We're on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook, and anywhere we're published or where you can listen or watch. In the description of the podcast, that URL is clickable, so you can go right to your website and check out your latest any of your records or anything you have on your website from there.
Awesome.
But thank you again for being a guest on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. Hope you have a good holiday next week, and I appreciate you being on the show.
My pleasure, my friend. Thank you very much.
Yeah, have a good night.
Have a good evening.